The Torah tells us, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Remember the Shabbos day and sanctify it. In fact, it's one of the Aseres HaDibros. It's one of the 10 statements, 10 principles we're going to be reading in a couple of weeks. Next week's B'Shalach, and the week after is Parashas Yisro. Yes. And it's the only ritual in the Aseres HaDibros. And from here we learn out the mitzvah of Kiddush. There's a mitzvah every Shabbos to remember the Shabbos day and sanctify it. So, what do you mean remember? Okay, so, right before the meal, Jeff?
Sorry, it seems to you from here, Mashma, that Kiddush Shabbos is derisa.
Yeah, well, I didn't get into Friday night or Shabbos. I was saying Shabbos.
How much of Kiddush?
Right, I was talking about Shabbos as generically. We'll get to the specifics.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? So you're about to have your Shabbos meal. Let's all take a moment of silence. We'll remember it and move on. Is that an acceptable option? What do you mean to remember? So our rabbis tell us that what does remember mean? So we have a tradition. We have it as well by remembering. Where else? There are other places, but we have a mitzvah to remember what Amalek did to us, the evils of Amalek. So again, so what does that mean? Remember it, just think about it and move on? So no, it says Zachar, it says remember, but it also says Lo Sishkach, don't forget. If I don't forget, I'll remember. So Gemara says, Lo Sishkach means believe, but Zachar means bepeh. You need an additional, it's not enough just to mentally remember, it must come with a verbal, it must verbalize it as well. So the Gemara, the Chazal make a similar drasha by Shabbos, even though it doesn't say Lo Sishkach, it says something else. Zachar. The Torah, the Aseres HaDibros is quoted twice in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Once in Parashas in Yisro, and later on in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, in Va'eschanan. And it's a little bit different when it comes to Shabbos. It says Shamar Yom HaShabbos. It says to guard, remember, however you want to put it. And the Gemara says Zachav v'Shamar b'dibar echad, as we say Friday night, that they both go together. And the Gemara makes a drasha similarly here, just like Zachar over there by Amalek means bepeh. So too, it's not enough to think about Kiddush, you have to actually verbalize it. Albeit there is one sheet, I believe, in the Prima Gadin, who says perhaps Binat Torah you could be Yotzi with just here alone, but we don't pass in that way, and maybe B'Shas HaChak. But we assume Zachar means bepeh. We mean you have to verbalize it. So the question is, how much of Kiddush is daraisa? So when it says, assuming, as we do, that Kiddush is biblical, so what is biblical? Is biblical saying the words of Kiddush? Is it saying it over a cup of wine? Is it actually drinking the wine? All three of those are opinions in the Rishonim. The Rambam's opinion is, Minat Torah, all you need is words alone. You fulfill your biblical. Everyone agrees, rabbinically speaking, you have to drink the wine and make it over a cup of wine. But biblically speaking, the Rambam says you yotze with words alone. Words of praise about Shabbos, that's how you fulfill your biblical mitzvah. And the 2 days in Tosas, one says it's enough, the words alone, but you have to do it over a cup of wine. Because they learn out from Zachar, it means alayayin, and the other opinion is you even have to drink the wine. But we paskin, like the Rambam, that we fulfill a mitzvah and Torah of Kiddush with dvarim, with words alone. Which leads to a famous question of the Magen Avram and the Dagol Meravava, the alias the Noda B'Yehuda. He goes by different names, but it's the same person. Dagol Meravava is his running commentary on the actual Shulchan Aruch, but it's the same as the great Noda B'Yehuda. So they ask, if one fulfills, so not the Makarov doesn't ask, he says so. the Makarov says that based on this Rambam, that you fulfill your biblical mitzvah with words alone. So according to the Makarov says, when one davens in Friday night davening, and you say the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, the same ending as our Kiddush, one fulfills our biblical mitzvah of Kiddush by davening Friday night, perhaps other things as well, but clearly if you do the Friday night tefillah in the Shemona Esrei, Mekadesh HaShabbos, you fulfill your biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. And in fact, it's very interesting proof. It happened this year, and I think it's going to happen next year. What do I mean? Yom Kippur fell out on Shabbos this year, as well as I think everything's going to be the same day next year, different dates. Everything's going to be about 3 weeks later, but you're going to have the same Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, and you're going to have, so I believe Yom Kippur again falls out on Shabbos. So the Makarov and others ask, what do we do about Kiddush when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos? Kiddush is a biblical mitzvah. So how do we make Kiddush when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos? So the Makarov answers, what do we see? We see from here, here's my proof. You know how you make Kiddush? When you daven Friday night, when you daven the Yom Kippur Friday night davening, you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush. And he says, just like it works on Yom Kippur, just like it works when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, that's the way it works all year round. It's just all year round. And he says, obviously, the rabbis, when Yom Kippur fell out on Shabbos, did not institute Kiddush over wine. So therefore, the rabbinical mitzvah is put on hold that year, and one fulfills the biblical mitzvah of Kiddush by davening Friday night. So Makarov's proof is that proves that all year round it works that way. So that's what the Makarov says, based on the Rambam, when you daven Friday night Shemona Esrei, you fulfill your biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. Which leads to the famous question of the Nod Rabbi Yehuda and others, the Dalel Ravava. He says, if that's the case, we have a potential problem, because we need another fact of life. A woman obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush. Because at first glance, Kiddush is the classical mitzvah aseh shazman grama, a classical time-oriented mitzvah. And we know, as the Mishnah tells us in Kiddushin, women are exempt from time-oriented mitzvahs. What greater time-oriented mitzvah than Kiddush? You can only do it on Shabbos. I can't make Kiddush today. It's too late. You got to wait for next week. You got to wait for Shabbos. So, at first glance, women should be exempt from the mitzvah of Kiddush. Yet the Gemara in Brachas, and Daf Chafam and Beis, 20b, I believe in Shavuos as well, 20b, they kept the consistency, tells us something different. The Gemara says, Nashim chayavos bekiddush tvar Torah. Women are biblically obligated as men in the mitzvah of Kiddush Friday night. Isn't it a mitzvah saseh shazman grama? So the Gemara answers, because we have another principle, as I mentioned in the beginning of this year. It says Zachar in Parashas Yisro, it says Shamar in Parashas V'eschanan. So the Gemara makes a drasha, Kol sheyeshnu b'shmira, yeshnu b'zechira. Whoever is included in the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos also has the obligation of Zechira Shabbos, i.e. the mitzvah of Kiddush. In fact, that is another discussion. How far does the mitzvah of Zechira goes? Does it only obligate women in Kiddush, or maybe all the mitzvahs hayom? That's a separate discussion. But what we see clearly is women are obligated min haTorah in the mitzvah of Kiddush Friday night. In fact, the Gemara has a similar drasha by another area. A woman obligated in the mitzvah of eating matzah, not today, but Leil Pesach. The woman, we know we have a biblical mitzvah, the Erev Tochu Matzos. We have a biblical mitzvah to eat matzah the night of Passover. So the question is, what about women? Again, it seems to be a time-oriented mitzvah, and women should be exempt. So the Gemara in Pesachah makes a similar drasha. It says, Kol sheyeshnu bebal tochel chametz, yeshnu b'kum ochel matzah. From the juxtaposition of the psukim, whoever is included in the Isser Chametz, the prohibition of not consuming Chametz, is also obligated in the positive mitzvah of matzah. So the Gemara makes the same drasha, even though it's a time-oriented mitzvah, but because of the drasha, women are obligated. So the question, so far we have men and women are equally obligated, or at least they both are obligated, whether they're equal, and that's a separate discussion at this point, but they're both obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush. And we have the Magen Avraham based on the Rambam, the way we paskin, as we see from when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, that when one davens Shmona Esrei, you fulfill your biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. So comes along the Nod de Bihud and asks, we have a problem, because it's less of a problem now, but it still is a problem, because during his day, and still probably true now, most women do not come to shul Friday night. More come now than they used to, and many women still don't daven. More women even who don't come to shul, it's not coming to shul, by the way. There are many women who come to shul maybe don't daven. Coming to shul is not the answer. I guess that's the truth. Many men come to shul and don't daven, then it wouldn't be a problem. The issue is davening, not actually coming to shul. They just have to clarify that point. But coming to shul and davening, or staying home and davening, we're going to run into the same issue. If one davens Friday night davening, we said you fulfill your biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. So the assumption is a man is davening Makarov, Leil Shabbos, Friday night. A woman is not. So the problem is we have a principle throughout Shas. The Gemara tells us that we know we have a principle of Shomea Ka'ona, that I could do, let's say Friday night, we're all obligated, let's say in Kiddush. So either different minhagim, everyone makes their own Kiddush, but usually I'd say the classical custom is usually one person makes for everyone. But really, every person, again, gets into the lumdis of Shomea Ka'ona, a separate class, but basically, is everyone else hearing Kiddush, or is everyone making Kiddush? That's a separate. Let's assume everyone's making Kiddush. That's the Kiddush of Shomea Ka'ona, that you're obligated in Kiddush, and by you listening, you get credit for making it. However, we're going to learn it. So the issue is, if a man already davened, so he fulfilled his biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. A woman has not davened, so she is still obligated biblically in Kiddush. And we have a general principle: someone who's only obligated rabbinically or on a lower level cannot do the mitzvah for someone else who's obligated biblically. So you all start off equal. So if let's say you have all men and all men daven, so it wouldn't be an issue. Everyone's on the same level. You could be on a higher level, but you can't be on a lower level. If you want to if you want to do it for someone else, you have to be at least on the same level, or if not higher. You can't fulfill the. If someone's obligated biblically in something, I'm only obligated rabbinically. I can't do the mitzvah for them. You got?
Yeah. So basically, unless the woman is daven, she has to do her own Kiddush.
Right. So exactly, that's the Duggal Maravava. He says the suggestion is women should daven. So he's saying that. He was on the front of the feminist movement. He said years ago we have a simple solution: women should be davening. They should daven their own Makarov, and therefore it's not a problem. Or perhaps if not, then if they don't, then they should make their own Kiddush. That's a suggestion of the Duggal Maravava. However, that doesn't seem to be the accepted. Well, that doesn't seem what most people do. Many women do not daven. Men do, and yet men are going home and making Kiddush for the women. So we have to come up with some other idea of why. So there's a famous answer of the Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer says as follows. He says, we know we have a principle throughout Shas that we've discussed many times, and we'll probably continue to discuss it many times. The principle of mitzvahs Srichas Kavana. Mitzvahs require intent. Again, that itself is a dispute in the Gemara, whether mitzvahs require intent. What do you mean this is a dispute, as I always point out? I'm about to put on my talis and tefillin. Make sure you don't have kavana. Is that opinion saying don't have kavana? Of course not. The whole machlokas is post facto. The question, everyone agrees before you do any mitzvah, you have to have the appropriate intent. The question is, I already put on my talis, tefillin, or whatever mitzvah we're talking about. I already did the mitzvah without the requisite intent. Do I have to repeat the mitzvah? That's the question at hand. So that's the machlokas in the Gemara. So it seems to be an apparent contradiction in the Rambam In Hilchas Shofar he writes one way, in Hilchas Chametz Lamatz another way. So the bottom line is the Magen Avram quotes, and the way we assume halacha is we make a compromise. On a mitzvah min Torah, on a biblical mitzvah, we paskin mitzvah strichas kavana. If you're not sure, you have to repeat it. On a rabbinical mitzvah, we could be more lenient. Keep on going. You don't have to repeat. So the Chassam Sofer points out, we know Kiddush is a mitzvah min Torah, as we just pointed out. Zachar Shom HaShabbat L'Kodsho. So when a person's davening Friday night, first of all, most people don't even know that you even have the ability to fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush when you're davening. So then, see, a little knowledge in that sense might be better. You know, so therefore you certainly aren't having kavanah for Kiddush. You don't even know. But even if you know, even if you're familiar with the principle, when you're davening, you're not thinking of fulfilling your mitzvah of Kiddush. So since mitzvah strichas kavanah, Kiddush is a biblical mitzvah, so it doesn't make a difference. You really don't fulfill your mitzvah when you daven. In fact, he says you should have negative kavanah. The Chassam Sofer says you should have in mind that you're not fulfilling your mitzvah. Most people don't have any kavanah, that works as well. But if you're thinking about it, if you heard the shir, then have negative kavanah, and therefore you go home and you have one happy family, you can make Kiddush for everyone. That's the suggestion of the Chassam Sofer. So he agrees with the assumption of the Magen Avram, but he comes up with a different solution than the Dagam Ravava. The Minchas Chinuch denies the principle. He's one that claims you don't even fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush in Friday night davening. What, based on what? Which premise is he disagreeing with? Because the Rambam does say it, that if you fulfill your biblical mitzvah of Kiddush with words alone. So that part, he's not arguing on the Rambam, and he could be going with the other Rishonim, but he's not. That's not his point of contention. He says another reason, because there's a Gemara in Psachim, I think it's Kuf Yud Zayin, it's a statement from one of the rabbis no one disagrees with. It says, what are the components of your mitzvah of Kiddush? What do you have to fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush? So we all know in Vayechu we mention Ma'aseh Bereshis, the creation of the world, Vayechu. But the Minchas Chinuch writes, based on the Gemara in Psachim, you also need Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. The two aspects of every Shabbos, that we have to realize God's the Borei, He created the world, but that's not enough. He's not retired in some old age home now. He's actually running the world. He's the Manig as well, and therefore part of our mitzvah of Kiddush, you have to mention Ma'aseh Bereshis, that God's the creator as well as He runs the world.
Deraisa.
Yeah, I mean, Torah. So therefore, that's the question, but that's a simple reading. So the Minchas Chinuch says, Bishlomer, when you read the Kiddush, you'll find it in your Kiddush when you go home. But in your Friday night davening, you would not mention there'll be no mention, at least in the Shemona Esrei, of Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. And therefore he says, I agree with the Rambam, but I disagree with the Dagam Ravava. There is no mention of Yitzias Mitzrayim in the Friday night davening in the Shemona Esrei. Hence, you did not fulfill your mitzvah. There's nothing to talk about. A man does not fulfill his obligation. He goes home. They're both obligated still minat Torah in Kiddush. However, the Minchas Chinuch points out, well, when I run into a problem, when Yontif falls out on Shabbos, then we daven the Yontif davening, which does mention Shalosh Regalim, then you'd have to deal, I don't know if he mentions that, but then according to the Minchas Chinuch, you'd have to deal with the problem, but it'd be a much more limited problem, but it wouldn't be a Friday night. It wouldn't be a weekly problem on Friday night. So the Minchas Chinuch denies the Yisod. He says, you're not Yotze in our Friday night davening, because some want to say, well, maybe it's only Midraban in that Gemara. Some say maybe, since we have a mitzvah, Smichas Gul or Tefillah, we have a mitzvah, you have to mention Gal Yisrael next to. So in the Shema, we are mentioning it. So some people try to answer up the Minchas Chinuch that way. Yeah. But
Sorry, could you say the woman fulfills her deraisa by saying Good Shabbos to her husband?
Yes, that's the Rabbi Akiva Eger who. So the question was, if a man fulfills his mitzvah, his biblical mitzvah of Kiddush Friday night in davening, how can he make Kiddush for his wife? So the Dagam says, you're right, the woman should daven herself. So the Chassam Sofer says, not a problem, mitzvah strichas kavana. You don't have kavana. Kiddush is a mitzvah minat Torah, so it's no problem. The Minchas Chinuch denies the premise. You can't fulfill the mitzvah because there's no Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the Aruch HaShulchan discusses, it's a discussion based on a Russian brachas, but even though it's true you can't do Shomea Ka'ona. Shomea Ka'ona means we're all obligated. I make Kiddush, you listen, we all get the mitzvah. There's another concept called Yatza Motzi. Yatza, even though I fulfilled my mitzvah, but I could still be Motzei you, based on the principle of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. So perhaps the Aruch HaShulchan suggests others that it's true, maybe even though I fulfilled my mitzvah, but I could still do a few. So that's a question whether women are included B'chal Arevis based on a rush. So, but that's what the Aruch HaShulchan suggests. But what you're alluding to is a Rabbi Kiva Eger. He says perhaps maybe that the Minig Yisrael is what happens. But some suggest anyway, a woman makes certain techinas, bakashas, when she lights the candles. There's a couple of prayers she says. So some want to say perhaps in those tefillah she's mentioning special mention of Shabbos. Or Rabbi Kiva Eger suggests only as ulai, it's not so pashut, it comes down to a machokas Rambam, that's a separate shir, whether it's true or not. But he always says perhaps the minute when you come home you say good Shabbos, she says good Shabbos. So when she says good Shabbos, perhaps she fulfills a mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush, because it's not clear, because you're not really mentioning special Shabbos. All you're saying is good Shabbos. Perhaps you might need a more elaborate description of Shabbos to fulfill your mitzvah. But that's probably a machlokas Rambam or Ramban, depending on what you hold the mitzvah of Kiddush is. Whether that's Rabbi Kiva Eger's suggestion, and perhaps that's where the midden came with.